That executive, Karen Handel, joins us now in her first national interview on the issue. Karen, thank you so much for being here. Let's get to the bottom of this, because there's been a lot of speculation about your role in this. And the Huffington Post came out today with a long interview claiming that they've spoken with anonymous sources and reviewed documents, and they say you were the sole authority in crafting and implementing this policy at Komen that would defund Planned Parenthood. Your response?
Well, first of all, I clearly acknowledge that I was involved in the process, but to suggest that I had the sole authority is just absurd. The process was vetted, the policies were vetted at all the appropriate levels in the organization. But I think the real point here is that, you know, let's all keep in mind, Susan G. Komen for the Cure, first of all, is a great organization. And the last time I checked, private non-organizations have a right and a responsibility to be able to set the highest standards and criteria on their own without interference, let alone the level of vicious attacks and coercion that has occurred by Planned Parenthood. It's simply outrageous.
Were you amazed by the pushback that followed when Susan G. Komen decided to defund Planned Parenthood?
You know, absolutely. I think, you know, for Komen, and, you know, obviously, please know I'm speaking for myself since I did resign this morning. And I want to clarify that. I resigned, Megan, because it was clear that all of this had gotten to a point where it was ratcheted so high. I was too much of a focal point. And Susan G. Komen for the Cure is a truly great organization that has done wonderful things. It has made an extraordinary impact in the fight against breast cancer. And I really felt I had a responsibility to just step aside so that they could refocus on their mission.
Understood. But there was, of course, a lot of pushback. And many people believe that you were responsible for it, that you were the person, because you had run for office prior to joining Komen, and you had said you wanted to defund Planned Parenthood in terms of taxpayer dollars, and that you brought that agenda with you when you went to Komen. I'm not suggesting that that's right or wrong. I'm just trying to ask you whether that is true.
Absolutely not. For Komen, for myself, the mission was always foremost in everyone's minds, the mission and the women that we serve. And for anyone, the only group here who has made this issue political has been Planned Parenthood. And whenever an organization is looking at their granting portfolio, they want to do high-quality grants and have the strongest, most stringent criteria they can. And what was unleashed over this past week was a vicious attack against a great organization, and frankly, individual attacks against Nancy Brinker, an individual whom I admire greatly. And I would think all of us should be saddened that an outside organization will put this kind of pressure on another organization around their processes and granting and how they do it and to whom they are going to grant.
But people believed it was a front for the truth. This stuff about, you know, we have to defund Planned Parenthood because they're under congressional investigation. Because of all the organization that Komen funds, only one wound up defunded, and that was Planned Parenthood. So it didn't smell right. It didn't pass the smell test. It seemed like Planned Parenthood was indeed the targeted organization, and why not just come out and say, we have a problem with funding this organization?
You know, I think the congressional investigation, along with the various state investigations, those were a factor in the decision. But make no mistake about it, you know, it was a bigger picture than that. There was a granting criteria as well as the controversies that were surrounding Planned Parenthood. And it's no secret, Megan, that, you know, Komen and other organizations that were funding Planned Parenthood had been under pressure for some years, long before my time, that had been going on, the pressure around the controversy. And, you know, I'm not going to get into, you know, too much on the internal aspects of things, but, you know, and this organization had a right to make what it felt was the best decision for the mission, And I think everyone can agree that if you have a grantee where there's this type of controversy surrounding it, Komen was doing its level best to move to neutral ground. And I will say, I was asked to look at options for doing that, some alternatives to do that. I was asked to do that. I looked at it, and I did.
It wasn't your idea, however, you're saying?
I'm saying that this was long an issue for Komen, dealing with the controversies of Planned Parenthood.
Before you got there.
And they did.
Let me ask you this.
That's right.
Let me ask you this. I know obviously what made a lot of news last week was the pushback by Planned Parenthood supporters who were outraged at the original Komen decision. What did not make as much news, but was also obviously a thread, was the celebration by many who consider themselves pro-life of the decision. Have you heard from those people in the wake of your decision today and in the wake of the news that broke last week?
I've not personally heard today. It's been obviously a busy morning for me and trying to sort things through and making sure we carried everything forward appropriately. As far as, you know, no one wanted to make this a celebration about anything. The whole purpose was to try to get to a place of neutral ground and move in that place so that Komen was not in the middle of this, so that we could be squarely focused on our mission and serving the women.
Can you tell us, Karen, you know, when Susan G. Komen reversed its decision last week, they were kind of vague about the reasons. What happened? Why did they reverse themselves?
Look, I think you can just see the pressure that was mounting around, and you know, I'm going to always be a professional. I'm not going to go into those details. I think you can ask Komen that. But it's clear that there was enormous pressure on the organization, enormous pressure. And you know, while I disagree, I respect the organization's right to make that decision and move forward.
I know that they've offered you a severance package, which you have declined. Why did you do that?
Look, this is a nonprofit, and I'm very much aware of that. And you know, I was doing my job, Megan, and I wasn't interested in having a paycheck or a written check for myself to just simply go away. And I wanted to do the right thing on my own terms, and that's what I tried to do.
Well, I know that they've accepted your resignation, and Nancy Brinker, who you mentioned, has wished you the best in your future endeavors. Karen, thank you so much for coming.
She's a fantastic organization.
Thank you very much. All the best to you.